Hi, I'm Welcome on the Road with Bobby Halton, and this is live from FDIC 2007. This afternoon, I'm really pleased. I've got a good friend of ours, a good friend of FDIC's. I've got Captain Ray McCormack from FDNY. Now, Ray has been teaching at FDIC for about 7 years. Every class is always sold out, so if you haven't been able to get into them, Ray's going to talk about some of the highlights of the classes he's teaching here, as well as what he's doing around the country. This isn't the only place that Ray teaches. Ray does a couple of benefits every year where he raises money for Widows and Orphans Funds, for the Annie Fredericks Foundation, and for several other very important charitable groups. If you haven't never had a chance to see Ray McCormick teach, you're missing a very important part of your fire education. Ray is a top-notch guy, a great gentleman, a fine officer from the FDNY, and we're really privileged and proud to have him be part of the FDIC family. Ray, welcome to On the Road.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for that glowing introduction.
No, it's all true. Ray does some great stuff. I saw the classes last year. That was for Andy Fredericks that you were teaching upstate New York. I wasn't able to get there. We had a conflict, but
right.
a lot of that's more hands-on stuff, right, that you're doing there.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm.
So you were doing line boss, and you were doing...
I did 2 classes this FDIC, line boss, which I premiered last year at the show. And then this time I did Engine Errors, the Dirty Dozen, which is an important class, and it was sold out. People couldn't get in, so
wow.
There's definitely some interest in that.
Now I sat in Line Boss last year. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about Line Boss. What do guys see in Line Boss, and what is line? A lot of guys might not understand what Line Boss means.
Well,
Lieutenant on an engine.
Right, exactly. You're in charge of the hose line. And basically, there's a little bit on leadership, basically just leadership on the fire ground, not in the fire station or any place else, where it really counts, on the fire ground. And we talk about the decision-making process that the officer has to go through, what type of line to stretch, where to stretch it, and how to extinguish the fire in private dwellings, multiple dwellings, commercial, and high-rise.
You know, what struck me last year when I sat in there, you were talking about the inch and three-quarter pre-connect mentality almost, mm-hmm. where the only line coming off the truck is that inch and three-quarter.
Correct.
And you had some great examples of why that's a bad idea and how to get out of that habit. Mm-hmm. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'm seeing some feedback from people that attend the conference that a lot of departments are at least looking at 2.5-inch line for higher flows, for bigger fires. And this way, at least, we're attacking the fire with a potential of putting it out. Otherwise, property loss is expanded if we don't have the right flow. So, but that's just a mindset. People are afraid to use it. We're trying to get the message out there that it can be user-friendly, even for short-staffed departments.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So a lot of guys, the assumption always is that the 2.5 weighs so much you can't move it.
That's correct. But there are some techniques to cheat on how to use it. And usually when I train, we do a segment exclusively on that hose line just to get people away from that fear of using it. And I think once they overcome that and train on it and drill with it occasionally, they get better at it, and they're not afraid to use it again.
Yeah, and that's the secret, isn't it? It's just drill. It's repetitive drill.
Exactly.
It's getting that line off. I used to joke that in Albuquerque, once in a while, they'd pull the 2.5 off, and it would go at a right angle every 3.5 feet because the folds.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Exactly.
And you got to get it off. It's good for the hose too.
Oh, definitely.
A lot of guys don't understand. It's hose is not meant to sit in a bed, and if you're not pulling it off for fires every day, you should probably pull it off every other day anyway to keep the hose supple and keep the folds moving around.
Yeah, and also in my presentation I talk about the fear of drilling. Actually, there is like this little bit of fear of drilling with an engine that we're going to stretch a line, we're going to put water in it, and we're going to get a call. Well, unfortunately, you do have to take that risk. If you bring extra hose out with you, that's fine. Just leave it there. Just take your nozzle along with you and go on your call. But you definitely have to train. You have to add water. Just add water.
Right, training without add water. That's a good one. The other issues I remember from watching Line Boss, you did talk about leadership. Mm-hmm. And what I thought was important, and I remember you said it last year, you said if you can lead on the fire ground, the rest of it just comes naturally.
Yeah, I believe that to be true. The fire ground is the real test for an officer. There's no 2 ways about it. Your results are there for all to see. There's really no excuse like, oh, it's a little too hot in there. Unfortunately, the engine doesn't have that excuse to fall back on. The incident commander is looking for results, and you have to give it to them. Yeah,
and I think that's very important. I mean, we always joke. I mean, truckies and engine guys joke with one another about
of course
what unit's more important. But if you think about it, there's 30,000 fire departments in America, and of that, I'll bet you there's about 90% don't have trucks.
That's correct.
There's still fire departments. You know, the truck work has to get done.
Exactly.
But the engine is what really, you know, without water, truck guys are just kind of highly trained spectators.
I agree.
And
and I was on a truck too.
and
so
I'll be the
that's
first guy to admit it.
Yeah.
Tommy Brennan will have to forgive me.
Exactly.
So-
I mean, if you're going to buy one apparatus for your department, it's got to be a pumper.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. What else do you cover in Line Boss?
The line boss class covers the different ways to stretch. I cover a lot of different types of stretches for multiple dwellings, really, because that's where the variety comes in
Right.
the stretching. And then also the commercial buildings. That's where we get into the 2.5-inch line and how to stretch it. And I try and give them a user-friendly way to do it, but sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and stretch it.
Well, you know, I remember years ago when you were talking about, and this goes back to way before Line Boss, Ray was teaching, had to be back maybe 2002, sat in on one of your classes, and when I went back to Albuquerque, I told the guys, we're not calling it 2.5, 1 3/4 anymore. I stole your little deal. I said, that's called commercial hose, and that's called residential hose. and they still do it today. And that has helped them out. In other words, when they go to commercial fire, if they've got a residential line, it better have been a waste paper basket.
Oh, exactly.
So, you know, and it puts that picture in their heads, a commercial line, residential line. So, and I stole that off you back.
Oh, that's great.
Right, 7
That's
years
great.
ago.
No,
So,
it makes sense. It's a
worked
great
out
way
really
to
well.
do it.
Worked
Sure.
out really well. So talk about the Dirty Dozen. Talk about some of the mistakes that people make at the pump.
Well, that was a new program I came up with, and because of the line of duty deaths and numerous injuries that occurred to firefighters who are working in engine companies, you would think that possibly the nozzle firefighter would be actually the safest position on the fire ground. You have the water, you have the ability to put out the fire, but we still have firefighters being injured and killed in engine companies from fire, basically. But a lot of it, and the mistakes, the errors that occur, start in rookie school and are made all the way up to the incident commander. And a lot of it is some of the things, I'll just discuss a few. I feel like the lack of standard operating procedures causes a lot of freelancing, and people don't know what to do. There's a lot of time wasted. We want to get that line in there as fast as we can and get a knock on the fire. Some of the other things that people still do, which I find unbelievable, is that they'll stretch dry lines into buildings. So we give them the parameters for what's the fire area. A lot of it is basic, but if we don't take care of the little things, and there are no little things, chocking doors, things like that, you know, so the program was designed to point out reasons why people get injured and killed, firefighters, and to just give the help you might need to change that.
Well, you know, when you talk about problems like that, the problem that I see, and again, I remember you speaking to it years ago, is they get away with stuff. You know, they get away with going in with a dry line. They think they're moving faster, and then they think that it's going to work all the time.
Right.
And someday they're going to pass fire and find themselves in a world of hurt.
Right,
But
right.
I remember you used to touch on some of those things, and now you've kind of taken all of those tidbits that you had and you've put them together.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I talk about when we do actual hands-on training with the hose lines, I see a lot of, I'll call it sloppy engine work.
Sure.
And in this program, I talked about the importance of having a firefighter back you up on the hose line. Basically, if you're flowing water and you don't need any help, you're probably not flowing a good amount of water, and that's important as well. So most people don't talk about that position, the backup firefighter. We discuss the importance of that and how to actually do it. I had a lot of slides on just how to hold the nozzle, all the different ways I see people hold it that are incorrect.
Right.
So,
Getting it behind them.
yeah, I just try and give them a heads up on this is the way you really should do it, as opposed to some of the things I see and told the reasons why. And unfortunately what happens is they were taught these things in the academy from people who are giving them bad information. So
Right.
we're trying to get that out there.
Well, that's important stuff. And Ray writes, so I know you write for us all the time, so you know, a lot of this stuff you cover in your articles, which we really appreciate. Any new articles coming? Anything?
I'm going to do already in the pipeline for a well hole stretch, which we do in multiple dwellings to save hose and get the line up there faster, and also going to do the engine errors as an article as well for the people who weren't at the conference.
You and I go back a ways, and you know, we all understand what happened in New York and how it's affected the department. And talking with a lot of the officers, guys like yourself, I know we're getting great guys in, young guys.
Yes.
And do you find yourself doing a lot more training now because of the younger, you know, having so many younger fellows on the job? And do you find yourself spending more time in drill, more time with your men?
Yes, we do. We do. There's no two ways about it. If you walk into a place that has a senior crew, you're going to drill, but the fundamentals maybe don't have to be covered as often. But the young firefighters actually give officers an opportunity to drill, if you will. If you need an excuse, there it is. Okay, we got to train the new guy. But I think if you develop a culture of this officer comes in, he trains, he doesn't train us for 3 hours at a clip.
Right.
He gives us something, half hour, 45 minutes, whatever it is. We go out, try and make it as realistic as possible. Don't just sit there at a table and read a book to people. They can do that on their own. Get out there, add water, have some fun, run everybody through it, and go back and
No disrespect,
wait for a
Ray,
fire.
but I don't see you reading a lot of books to people.
No, I don't. No.
Just not your style.
No, not at all.
You know, one of the things that's great about you, too, in the classroom is you really come to life. Every time I've heard you talk about this fire, that fire, you know, and you were there, you know, and you just really seem to be able to take it down to, I learned tons. I've told you 100 times how much I've learned in your classes, but, you know, the amount of knowledge that you have when you're up in front of the group, do you ever get people that come to you later, like I did, and say, hey, Ray, okay, you know, I think for guys like you, a lot of what you have is automatic in the back of your head. And we're happy that when you write it so that we can read it through. And I'll tell you, we love having you here. And one of the things I've asked Ray to do is to think about a video series. So I know we're talking about that.
Right.
And we're going to get Ray to actually get together with some of his guys. We'll send some camera folks out. Ray's going to do a couple of quick drills and get stuff out there. Because a lot of what you talk about, I think for guys inside the FDNY, and you in particular, who are so familiar with the equipment, so familiar with the stretches, so familiar with the work, forget that for a lot of volunteer companies, a lot of other guys out there, you got to slow it down just a little bit. You know,
You're right.
I remember talking to a kid one day out in the drill field here at FDIC. I said, kid was pulling a stretch to the door, and I said, you better have some working hose. And he turned to me and said, oh no, Chief, all the hose works. So, he had no idea what working hose was.
Sure.
You know?
We talked about that too in the engineering, stretch and short.
Oh yeah. And you know, you see kids get to the door and they have nothing on their shoulder, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna pull the rest of it in.
Exactly.
That's what I think might be happening with some of the 2.5 problems. You know, they have all the hoses charged in the street. So pulling it to the building is an interesting deal.
Definitely. And staffing, of course, is an issue. But when we talk about staffing and engineers, if we don't have enough people, but we have more people on scene, the incident commander has to delegate those people to the hose line. That's priority number one for the most part at most residential fires. But you're right. Even nomenclature. Buddy of mine, I sent him an email. I was talking about a trick, how to use this 2.5. And I called it the butts, the hose butts. And then he sent it back. He said, you talking about the coupling? I said, yep. So, you know.
Yeah, plugs.
You're right. You have to be a little generic, you know, stuff like that.
You got to slow down sometimes because you get ahead. You're so used to your system.
That's correct. Yeah. That's correct.
But you know, when somebody takes your classes, it's great. I mean, I think you're the best engine man out there.
Well, I appreciate
that.
Thank you.
Your stuff is it's some of the best stuff. So what do you see happening overall with engine work towards the future? I just looked at this new engine being unveiled down here by the Pierce Company. Very interesting stuff. I mean, really interesting stuff in terms of shorter wheelbase, better hydraulics. Are we getting better with our engine work? Are we this CAV stuff? All this is coming. Is this?
I think there's a
good
tremendous interest in the engine company. The role might have gotten lost a little bit, you know. You know how things are cyclical.
Sure.
One decade, it's the rescue. The back to basics approach to let's just get the fire out. We have to make the engine a priority. I see that. I see a lot of people that I talk to around the country changing their hose, maybe buying different nozzles. So the message is getting out there, and FDIC and fire engineering are definitely the vehicle that's pushing that. So.
Well, it's easy to push.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you bring one weapon to a fire,
Right.
water.
Right. Yep.
If you can't get it on the fire,
Mm-hmm.
you're just there to observe.
Exactly.
You know, so, but it's interesting to me. You know, I saw Cavs come down the road. Cavs was going to save us. And I think it's a great tool.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's got applications. But still, I think the number one tool for me is always volumes of water. The more volumes of water you can bring to any event, in my experience, has been the home run.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I'm not trying to put down the Cavs folks. I think it's got a tremendous tool. Cock lofts, void spaces, you know, tremendous tool. I still haven't seen it on large volume fires. I haven't talked to anybody who's, you know, wind-driven flame fronts.
Oh, yeah.
And we
Sure.
talked about that.
Yep. I talked about that in the high-rise portion, about the ventilation and how important it is to not do it just on a lark. You know, it has to be coordinated. There's no two ways about that.
These heat release rates, and you talk these big fires, especially when you're making these hallways, if you have a corridor that's got a good wind behind it, you got a loser. You got to let it burn out.
Yeah, definitely. You can't. I mean, we've had multiple fires in New York where two or three 2.5-inch lines are not making a dent.
Lionel Hampton fire,
Yep.
wasn't it? That's a great, perfect example. 4 great engine companies, 2 solid lines, nobody was moving.
Yeah, it's just, you just can't. We had a fire just recently, and we had been looking at our stamp pipe operation. So we made a few minor adjustments to that, and it turned out they had a fire. They were short-staffed getting up on a fire floor, and 2 guys stretched the whole line, basically, and put it out. Luckily, the wind was blowing the right direction, actually, and because the fire had broken through the window. But one of the firefighters said to me, he said, "Lou, all that drilling we did last week on the engine really paid off." So sometimes you get that added benefit.
Wow. And you know, you said it a little bit earlier, you just talked about having people freelancing. And when Ray says that, for the folks out there who are in FDNY, in the FDNY, every position has a job at every job.
Yes.
And we got away from that probably the early 80s, when the whole command, and you talked about it, cyclical stuff. We had the command romance, we had the RIT romance, we had the truck romance.
Sure.
Hopefully we're getting back to the engine romance, because you're right, riding positions in a lot of houses are irrelevant. You know, the officer is expected to turn around to the firefighters and tell them that's not the way it works in a real fire. You have to know what your job is and do your job. And it was interesting because Chief Brunacini last night said that. Chief Brunacini said we lost our tactical focus back, 30 years ago. And Tommy Brennan and I had discussed that with him about 2 years ago. And I think it's, if we have guys like him saying it, kind of the leader of the command deal,
Right.
I think there's hope for that engine work is going to come back and people are going to get that structure. That lack of structure, I think, gets us in trouble in the fire ground.
I agree. And there's plenty of structure available for the engine, from knowing your personnel who you think should be in certain positions, applying those positions, and the tasks that are associated with those positions. You have accountability now. If you don't know who's supposed to be doing something, who do you go back to and correct it with?
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
want to know who's the third person on the line humping the hose into the building. If there's nobody there, I don't know who it is, who can I talk to about that? So I agree. Hopefully the engine renaissance will start.
Well, we're hoping you'll do it.
I'll lead the way.
You have any other training coming up in the New York area or anything you want to talk about? Or you have anything on the hopper that you want guys to know about?
No, I'm going to try and run a benefit seminar, I believe, in the fall. We'll have to see how that goes. The last one I did was for the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. And we just pick a charity and get some speakers, usually people that speak here, and they're more than happy to come and do it. And it's always for a great cause.
Well, good for you. Ray, thank you for being on the road with us. We appreciate
my pleasure.
it. You're going to see a lot more Ray McCormick in the future. He's agreed to allow us to do some videos, and he's writing for us extensively now. Probably the leading guy for engine work in the country today, and a great friend of FDIC. Thank you for sharing some time with us. This is On the Road with Bobby Halton.